Amara was the kind of young woman who carried fire in her eyes. She lived in a small town where red earth clung to every shoe, and the hum of buses never seemed to stop. Her parents were ordinary people, her father a mechanic, her mother a fruit seller, but Amara's heart was restless. She believed she was meant for something greater, a life beyond the dust, and her beauty made her stand out. Wherever she went, people noticed. The way her braids shone in the sunlight, the way her laughter filled the air. But her beauty was matched by her stubbornness. She had no patience for the old warnings her family repeated. Her mother often said, "Not every smile comes from a living man. Some faces belong to shadows." Amara only rolled her eyes. To her, these were stories for the old, not truths for her generation. She wanted a love story that would sweep her into another world. She wanted someone who looked like he had stepped out of her dreams, someone different from the boys in her town who smelled of sweat and impatience. At night, she scrolled through her phone, watching couples with matching outfits, perfect dates, and vacations she could only imagine. She sighed, whispering, "When will my turn come?" It would come sooner than she expected. And when it did, it would not be what she thought. It happened on an ordinary Saturday. Amara and her friends had gone to the city, wandering through noisy streets filled with the scent of roasted corn, car exhaust, and fried plantain. They laughed, tried on dresses in shops they couldn't afford, and ate meat pies as they strolled past crowded stalls. And then she saw him. The stranger. He stood apart from the chaos as if the dust of the city dared not touch him. His clothes were sharp, his shoes polished like mirrors. His skin gleamed under the fading sun, and when he smiled, it was as though the crowd fell away. His name, he said, was Chaik. His voice was smooth, carrying a rhythm that made Amara's heart stumble. He asked for her name, and when she spoke it, he repeated it slowly, as if tasting it. He claimed to be a businessman, recently returned from abroad. He carried himself with the confidence of someone who had seen worlds beyond her imagination. Amara's friends teased her mercilessly, nudging her when Chaik asked for her number. She pretended to hesitate, but her fingers betrayed her heart, tapping her digits into his sleek phone. That night, the messages began. Long, sweet sentences that made her blush under her blanket. He called her special, told her she was different from anyone else. His words wrapped around her like silk, tightening with every text. For Amara, this was no coincidence. It felt like destiny, the answer to her late-night prayers. But destiny has two faces, one that shines in daylight and another that hides in the shadows. The more Amara spoke with Chaik, the more she was drawn into his world. He called her every night, his voice calm and deep, telling her stories of faraway places and promising her a life beyond her imagination. She would fall asleep with her phone pressed to her ear, smiling in the dark. But as her love for him grew, the shadows around her began to whisper. Her dreams changed first. She dreamed of footsteps circling her bed, of hands brushing against her skin that were icy cold. Sometimes she saw herself in a white dress, surrounded by guests whose faces were blurred, as if they belonged to another realm. She woke with her heart racing, her room heavy with silence. Yet instead of fear, she felt excitement. She told herself the dreams were a sign of destiny unfolding. Her family, however, noticed the change in her. Her father frowned when he heard the name Chaik. "There was once a Chaik I knew," he muttered, "but that man died years ago." Her grandmother, with her sharp eyes and wrinkled hands, held Amara's wrist one evening and whispered, Child, spirits often borrow the faces of the living. If you follow without question, you may not return. Even her mother begged her to be cautious. Not every man who comes with gifts comes in peace. Some carry graves behind their smiles. But Amara only laughed, brushing off their words as fear and old superstition. She told herself they were simply too stuck in the past to see what she had found. And so, against all warnings, she continued to open her heart to the stranger whose shadow was already upon her. Chaik moved quickly, as though time itself bent to his will. Within weeks, he was everywhere in Amara. He sent flowers that seemed too perfect, their petals fresh even after long journeys. He bought her gifts she couldn't explain to her friends, necklaces that gleamed like moonlight, dresses that fit as if they'd been sewn in her dreams. When he spoke, it was with certainty. "You are mine, Amara. From the first day I saw you, I knew. I have waited for you longer than you can imagine." Those words wrapped around her heart like chains made of velvet. Her friends swooned, insisting she had struck gold. To them, Chaik was the answer every young woman prayed for, wealthy, attentive, and utterly devoted. But sometimes, in the middle of laughter, she noticed odd things. His shadow seemed too long in the setting sun. His hands were always cool, no matter how hot the day. And though he promised her the world, he never spoke of his family, never let her meet anyone from his life. She noticed, yes, but she brushed it aside. Love, she told herself, was never perfect. Love was about trust, and she chose to trust him. So when he asked one quiet evening, "Will you be my wife?" she didn't hesitate. Her family protested, voices rising in warning. Her grandmother wept. Her father's silence was heavy as stone. But Amara, blinded by desire and the glitter of a new life, said yes. She believed she was stepping into a future of light. But love that moves too fast often runs headfirst into darkness. The wedding came swiftly, almost too swiftly, as if pushed forward by an unseen hand. Chaik insisted there was no need for delay. "When love is true, why waste time?" he told Amara, and she agreed, glowing with anticipation. The day of the ceremony was unlike any other in the town. People whispered that they had never seen such splendor. The decorations shimmered as though woven from starlight. The food never seemed to run out. And yet, something about it all felt strange. The guests arrived in numbers too great to count. They filled every seat, every space, but when Amara glanced closely, their faces blurred at the edges, shifting like smoke. Some smiled too widely, others clapped without sound. She blinked, and they appeared normal again, leaving her uncertain of what she had. Chaik was dazzling in his suit, his smile bright enough to calm her nerves. As they exchanged vows, his voice carried like a low drum, vibrating through her bones. The air felt heavy, almost suffocating, yet Amara told herself it was simply the weight of the moment. When the feast began, music filled the air, but the rhythm was haunting, a melody that tugged at her chest as though it came from another world. Guests danced with a strange, jerking grace, their feet barely touching the ground. That night, as Amara left the celebration hand in hand with her new husband, she felt a chill sweep over her, colder than any harmattan wind. She shivered but forced a smile, convincing herself it was just nerves. She was now a wife, bound to the man of her dreams. But some dreams, once embraced, do not let go. Chaik took Amara away from her family the very next morning. He said their new life would begin in his house, a place she had never seen before. The drive seemed endless, winding down roads she didn't recognize, past villages she had never heard of. She stared out the window, a small knot forming in her chest. When they finally arrived, the house stood tall and silent at the edge of a thick forest. Its walls were spotless, the windows gleamed, yet no voices carried from nearby. It was a house that seemed too perfect, too untouched by time. Inside, everything shone. The floors glistened, the furniture looked unused, and yet there was no warmth. No family photographs, no signs of life, only silence that pressed against her ears. The first night, Amara noticed the house did not sound like any home she had known. There were no creaks of wood, no hum of insects, no distant laughter. Instead, faint whispers echoed in the hall, as though voices lingered just out of sight. "Who else lives here?" she asked. Chaik smiled, his lips curving too slowly. "No one. This is our world now, Amara, just you and me." At night, the bed felt cold no matter how close she lay to him. His touch, though tender, carried the chill of deep water. And sometimes, when the lights flickered, she swore his reflection in the mirror didn't move in time with his body. Amara tried to silence her fears, telling herself love required patience. But deep inside, unease had taken root. The home she had dreamed of felt more like a waiting cage. Days turned into weeks, and the unease in Amara's chest grew heavier. She tried to ignore it, tried to convince herself that love was supposed to be mysterious. But the house itself betrayed secrets. One evening, as she prepared dinner, she noticed Chaik's shadow stretching unnaturally long across the wall. It moved when he was still, twisting as though it had a life of its own. She blinked and it returned to normal, but the image burned into her mind. Another time, she heard voices whispering in empty rooms. They spoke her name softly, almost pleading, and when she followed the sound, the air grew so cold her breath turned white. But the moment that shattered her illusions came late at night. Amara woke to find the bed empty. She searched the house until she reached the sitting room where Chaik stood before the window. His body was rigid, his skin pale in the moonlight, and when he turned, his eyes glowed faintly, hollow like embers dying in ash. Her breath caught. "Chaik, what are you?" He smiled, though it did not reach his eyes. "I am yours. Didn't you promise to love me forever?" His voice was different, layered, echoing, as if more than one tongue spoke through him. In that instant, Amara felt the weight of every warning her family. The stranger she had married was no ordinary man. She was living with something that belonged to the other side. After that night, Amara could no longer deny the truth. Chaik was not like other men. His smile was a mask, his touch a chilling reminder that she had married something beyond flesh. The house itself seemed to conspire with him. At dusk, the walls whispered, low voices that carried sorrow and warning. Sometimes she heard weeping in the corridors, though when she found only silence. Doors opened and closed on their own, and mirrors reflected faces she did not recognize, women with hollow eyes staring back at her. One evening, while exploring a room she had never dared to enter, Amara found something that froze her heart. In the corner stood a faded trunk. Inside were photographs, wedding pictures, each of Chaik with a different bride. Their smiles were bright, but their eyes told another story: fear, sadness, resignation. And in every photo, the bride seemed to blur at the edges, like smoke ready to vanish. She dropped the photographs, her hands trembling. The whispers around her grew louder, as if the house itself mourned. That night, the faces from the pictures came to her in a dream. They surrounded her bed, whispering in one voice, "Leave before he takes you too." Amara woke in a cold sweat, her heart pounding. She looked at the man sleeping beside her, his chest rising without sound, his skin too pale under. For the first time, she admitted the truth to herself. She was not a wife in a happy marriage. She was a prisoner in a house of echoes, chained to a ghost who had claimed many before her. Amara knew she could not stay. Every day in the house drained her body growing weaker as if the walls themselves were feeding on her spirit. Chaik remained attentive, even loving, but his eyes betrayed an emptiness that chilled her soul. He was not alive, and yet he would not let her go. Desperation pushed her to remember her grandmother's words. "Spirits often borrow faces. If you follow without question, you may not return." That night, when Chaik left the house, as he sometimes did, vanishing without explanation, Amara gathered her courage. She lit a candle, sat on the cold floor, and whispered prayers she had long forgotten. She called on her ancestors, begging them for strength, for guidance, for a path. The flame flickered violently, and in its glow, a shadowy figure appeared before her. It was her grandmother, or perhaps only her spirit. The voice was firm. "Child, the bond can be broken, but only if you leave before the next moon rises. Do not look back, and do not answer if he calls your name." The next evening, when the house fell into its heavy silence, Amara slipped on her shoes and crept out. Every step was a battle. The walls groaned, the floor trembled, and whispers rose like a storm. "Stay, stay, stay." But she pushed forward, heart pounding, until the forest opened to the night sky. For the first time in weeks, she tasted freedom on her tongue. Behind her, Chaik's voice rose, deeper and darker than ever before. "Amara, where are you going? Come back to me." Her legs trembled. Her heart screamed to turn. But her spirit knew to answer him now was to be lost forever. Amara ran until her lungs burned, until the forest thinned and the red earth roads of her childhood came into view. Her legs carried her faster than she believed possible, but still, she heard Chaik's voice echoing behind her, calling her name with a sweetness that masked its hunger. She remembered her grandmother's warning, "Do not look back, do not answer," and pressed on. At last, she stumbled into her town, collapsing at the threshold. Her mother's cry filled the night as she rushed to lift her daughter, thin and pale, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. Neighbors gathered, whispering prayers, while her father stood silent, grief and relief mingling on his face. The elders were summoned. Rituals were performed. Herbs were burned, chants filled the air, and water was poured over Amara's head to cleanse her of the shadow's touch. For days she drifted between sleep and wakefulness, haunted by dreams of the house and the faces of the other brides. Slowly, the weight lifted, and warmth returned to her body. When she finally rose, her grandmother's words echoed in her heart. She had been warned, but pride had closed her ears. She had followed desire without wisdom, and it had nearly Amara never spoke Chaik's name again. Some nights when the wind howled, she thought she heard him calling from far away, but she did not answer. She had learned, and so her story became a warning for others. Not every stranger is what he seems, and not every promise of love comes from the living. Some doors, once opened, lead only into shadows. The end.